This is a CBSN Pittsburgh special presentation.
Welcome to another edition of Around the Table, Politics 2021. I'm Stacy Smith. The May primary is over, and it left in its wake an incumbent sitting on the sidelines and perhaps a shakeup within the Democratic Party in Pittsburgh. And it also perhaps opened the door for a challenger in the fall. That's part of our discussion today as we go around the table with our analysts, and I'm going to introduce them to you now. We begin with Tom Corbett, the former Republican governor of Pennsylvania. Mr. Corbett also served as a state attorney general and the U.S. attorney for the Western District of Pennsylvania. Mr. Corbett is with a law firm in Pittsburgh now, but he also teaches law at Duquesne University. Also, we're going to be joined on the other side of the table by our Democrat, Jim Byrne. Jim is the former state Democratic Party chairman. He also served as chairman of the Allegheny County Council, and he was mayor of Millvale for several years. And Jim practices law in the city of Pittsburgh. Back to the Republican side of the table, we find Keith Schmidt. Keith's political background goes back to the Reagan years. He also served as the state director for former Pennsylvania Republican Senator Rick Santorum and was a consultant to Santorum's presidential bid in 2012. And Keith has his own consulting firm and has had for a while now in Pittsburgh. Finally, we turn to the great philosopher and Democrat of Around the Table, Joe Mistic. Joe's name is a familiar one in Democratic state politics across the state. He served as deputy mayor of the city of Pittsburgh and held several other positions within city government. Joe teaches law at Duquesne University, and you can read his thoughts about life and politics every Sunday in the Trib. I want to thank all of you for being with us once again on Around the Table. So let us begin now with what happened just past a couple of days ago on Tuesday. An upset. Ed Gainey defeats the incumbent Bill Peduto. Now, 2 weeks ago, most of you said that the incumbent Peduto could be in trouble. I don't think any of you predicted an outright upset, but you said that there were signs indicating that he could be in trouble. Jim Byrne, I'm going to start with you since you're used to head up the state Democratic Party. Taking a look at what happened, what did happen here?
A combination of things, obviously. A perfect storm, an alignment of events that needed to fall into place at the right time, and that happened. You had an incumbent who was on the ropes because he has failed to lead. There's been a lot of criticism. One of the local editorial boards said he lost the intellectual curiosity to be a mayor. I agree with that. He did not build bridges. He blew them up. He was more involved or prioritizing bike lanes. He was more in prioritizing overseas trips instead of the retail work that needs to be done to be an effective mayor. Many communities suffered for it. He came in with the progressive wing of the party, but then he did not evolve with the progressive movement in Southwest Pennsylvania or in the city of Pittsburgh. He lost the connectivity that you need to be successful. This groundswell, and we thought because there were three opponents, this groundswell was enormous. The three opponents would make it difficult for the incumbent, while vulnerable, to lose in a full primary. That groundswell coagulated around one candidate, Ed Gainey, very smart, very savvy, very dynamic and charismatic. And that movement got around him. Disgruntled voters got around him, and they made their choice with one of the three challengers being Mr. Gainey. So they did not split that opposition that we thought would likely happen. And because of that alignment, Pittsburgh made history. I do not believe an incumbent in a challenged primary has ever lost before. And that speaks to the dissatisfaction with the incumbent.
Governor, you mentioned 2 weeks ago that that there was a possibility that given the way politics have gone recently, that if the African-American vote did come out strong, that it would help push Mr. Gainey perhaps into not only a challenging role, but perhaps a victory. Your thoughts about what you said then and what happened?
And I'm going to guess that that's what happened. As you know, I'm not here at home in Pittsburgh. We're on vacation, as you can tell from the lighting behind me. And I'd almost look to Jim and say, what were the wards like? What was the vote like in the Democrat black wards in Pittsburgh? And I suspect he did very, very well in those wards.
He did.
And probably did well, 13th ward, 14th ward.
Yeah, Governor. He did. The 12th and the 13th, the 1st ward, the 3rd ward, the 5th ward. Yeah, these wards he did very, very well. He did very well over in Bill Peduto's backyard. We talked about that. The 7th ward, the 14th ward, the 11th ward. These are progressive wards over on the east side. He did very, very, very well there. And when you're losing in your own backyard, you have a problem.
Right.
And he lost in his own backyard. So you're right, Governor. Very high turnout, and 3.5, 4 to 1 or higher in those areas for the challenger.
So I'll use his answer as my answer. It's exactly what I thought was going to happen. You had 3 other candidates. None really funded very well. And Peduto spent a lot of money. And what I thought was the key sign was the negative ads that Peduto put on the last few weeks attacking Ed Gainey. Frankly, when you're the incumbent, if you're doing negative ads, in my mind, you're in trouble, and you know you're in trouble.
Joe Mystic, you mentioned that as well 2 weeks ago, that Peduto had gone negative on television and in all of his ads. Are we seeing a change within the city politics in the Democratic Party now, Joe?
Yeah, I think we're certainly seeing a move to the left. Politics in the city of Pittsburgh have become more progressive at the same time that they've gotten more conservative outside the city limits, and certainly outside of Allegheny County. And that's probably reflective of a national trend. Bill Peduto, as Jim Byrne correctly said, was trapped by 2 forces here. He was never good or really very much interested in the housekeeping aspects of being a mayor. There's an old adage that if you plow the streets, fix the potholes, and collect the garbage, you'll be reelected mayor forever. And there's some truth to that. But he also seemed to miss those shifts, those politically philosophical shifts in the mood, in the values, and in the trends here in the city. And he, at one point, was probably thought of as one of the leaders of progressive political thought in the city. And in short order, he fell pretty far behind. And they moved on without him, is really what happened here. Those negative ads were Hail Mary passes. I think we said that before. When you run ads that vicious, that late in the campaign, it means you've seen something in your polling data that indicates that you have to do something drastic, and it's worth the risk. He took the risk. I think it backfired.
All right, Keith, 2 weeks ago, you indicated that if the incumbent did not do better than 55 or 50%, there might be a challenger. Where does that stand now in the fall?
Well, I think it's a lot steeper for that challenger now. I think that independent, who I still think is going to likely enter the race, a well-funded, articulate Black independent, is no longer getting what he wanted, which was a weakened mayor. He's getting a new candidate. And that changes, I think, the card significantly. And we probably have to reevaluate a strategy moving forward. But it was pretty remarkable what happened on Tuesday. I think we saw all the underpinnings of it, but we none of us who are considered somewhat experts in this field really thought it was going to happen in the primary. But it's indicative of the people suffering across not only Pennsylvania, but all around the country. American cities are in trouble. They were in trouble before the pandemic. They're in worse trouble now. We saw a lot of upsets around Pennsylvania in small cities. The incumbent mayor of Harrisburg got displaced on Tuesday. So there is some uncomfortable, unsettling views by a lot of people in American cities and how they're being represented. And Joe's right in a lot of regards, and I think all of us agree on this panel that he's kind of lost touch to the basics. We told jokes about him caring about the Paris Accords and things that really have nothing to do with the basics of safe streets and clean streets and getting rid of the graffiti and knocking down abandoned buildings and dealing with crime and drugs and all the things that you feel like you're engaged. And he acquiesced that, I think, to his chief of staff and others. And by the time the third term, it no longer was a few people saying it. It was a lot of people saying. But the real interesting thing is on this 4 people in the race, really just 3 that were competitive, we all thought that would favor the mayor. But interestingly enough, when you look at the tea leaves, and it's going to take some time I guess, to examine it completely. But in many ways, I think Tony Marino might have been the spoiler for the mayor. I think actually that might have cost him the race, the 7,000 plus votes that he took. I mean, in low turnout elections, even with the spike turnout, it's still not a big turnout because it's a primary in an odd year. But in a low turnout election, there's always an opportunity for a well-organized group to come in and make a move. And the black wards and the progressives and you were correct in saying that the progressives moved. The progressives were owned by this mayor early on, probably at the end of his time on the council in his early years as mayor. He lost those progressives. And I think it was a unique coalition, a perfect storm of progressives within his own part of the city and the black community that decided we're going to take this on and we're going to coalesce and turn out and steal an election. And by God, and I won't even say they stole it. They were better prepared for the outcome they were looking for. And they said, we know he's weak. Let's get out there. Let's shake things up. And by God, they did it on Tuesday.
Stacy, very quickly, look at the thousands of Republican write-in votes that need to be tallied. And I suspect that we will see the name Marino having enough that if he wants, he could seek the nomination in the fall. He'll get a letter from elections if he hit the criteria. I believe it's 500 in Pittsburgh.
I think it's
suspect more than
250.
how much is it, Joe?
I think it's 250.
He's gonna there's thousands.
500 countywide.
He'll
Yeah.
hit that. He will hit that. And
Yeah,
if
he will
chooses it-
because he's had an absolute organized effort for that I'm well
yeah.
aware of, you're well aware of.
Yeah,
So you're right. And that let me just also say that goes to the difficulty for an independent. If there's a
Right.
Republican on the ballot and a
Forget it.
Democrat and an independent, you could almost guarantee Democratic victory in the fall.
it needed to be Peduto as the Democrat wounded for an independent to have a chance and no Republican on the ballot. Now you don't have that. Mr. Gainey will bring the support of the entire Democratic Party together. I do not see an independent now having a chance. Mr. Marino has less of a chance in the fall than he did in the spring. Ed Gainey will be the next mayor of Pittsburgh.
Well, let me
And let me
back to
also
what-
say real
Stacy,
quick,
can I
Stacy. Go ahead, Gov.
Can I just add one thing? There's one perspective that I think subtly is at play, and it's the whole COVID election. This was a COVID election. I think people were also upset, and I think the governor obviously lost two issues on the constitutional amendment, and it really wasn't even close on that. I think there were some voters who would just say, let's get rid of everybody. And that probably played in here a little bit to the detriment of Peduto.
And I was involved with a number of judicial races locally because, as you know, almost a quarter of the local judiciary on a common police court was up for election, 9 of 43 seats. And I can tell you, I've already done some initial analysis, and that movement to have an organized effort to bring people to the polls for Mr. Gainey changed the fortunes on the Democratic nominations for common police court. For the first time ever, 6 women hold those nominations and 4 blacks were nominated for the common police court, which is really historic in Allegheny County.
Very quickly, the slate of 8. There was a progressive slate of 8 that were endorsed by the progressive movement. I think 6 of them won. And it speaks to this grassroots that is the best grassroots now, better than the Allegheny County Democratic Committee, better than any organization. This grassroots movement they have. If you're an incumbent in Southwest PA, you are an endangered species right now. They're coming for you.
5 of them won, actually. Chelsea Wagner, Rena Watson, Nicole
5.
Henry Taylor, Tiffany Sizemore, and Lisa Middleton. But that's still, when you have 41 candidates to win 5 of 8, that's a huge victory.
Well, that brings you back to the question I asked Joe. Are we going to see a major shift in the Democratic Party in the city of Pittsburgh now?
We've already seen it.
Okay.
It's here. And this isn't the first, this is the biggest prize that they've captured. But they took out the Costas in 2018. Dom and Paul lost to this movement. They have been successful for the last 3 cycles now. So they're here. And there's more to come from this organization. There has been a change, a seismic change in how Democrats do business. The establishment wing, they're even those who they endorse. The chief executive, I think he's O for the millennium in endorsements, and it's not just him. People want to see, they're not happy, and the governor's right. A lot of it has to do with COVID, but this started before COVID. The message has changed. The message is new faces, and this movement isn't waiting for someone to tap them on the shoulder and say, "It's your turn now." They're standing up and they're taking it themselves.
Yeah,
And there's some very good candidates we have in office now because of that.
This movement is certainly on a roll, so to speak. But you know, if you look at what's happened in the rest of the country, some places that are 6 months or perhaps even a year ahead of us in these terms, this is a window. I mean, and they're at the window. And I think they have to make whatever changes they're hoping to make as quickly as they can, because in those other parts of the country, the pendulum has already begun to swing back to the right slightly. And so, you know, this is, you know, typical politics. Anytime you're towards an extreme from a political philosophy perspective, you only get the rest there for a moment, and then the pendulum begins to swing in the other direction. So this is their time, and they've certainly flexed their muscles in this last election with 4 Black Democratic Party nominees for judgeships. Way overdue, way overdue in this county. A remarkable progress, and you know, they better hold on to this progress and drive through November to make sure that this sticks.
And Stacy, I think it's worth mentioning, although we all know that the metro area for Pittsburgh is over 2.5 million people, but the city has just around 300,000.
Yeah.
It's actually not a big race to run, and you can actually still win it by grassroots and organizing on the streets. Most people nationally think that's not possible, but they don't understand how really small the population of the city of Pittsburgh proper is. And Ed Gainey was outspent 3-1. The mayor spent $1.2 million, and Ed Gainey spent just under $400,000. But the office wasn't for sale. They had already made a decision, and you couldn't change their mind by trying to buy it. And more importantly, there was absolutely what I would call a grassroots movement for mayor. It happened under the radar, and that's why a lot of people didn't see it coming.
I want to put a bow on this one part. Jim, you mentioned about Republican write-ins for Marino. Are you saying that he may then run as a Republican in the fall, or what were you saying?
Here's what I'm talking about is the Republican Party didn't put a name on the ballot. So oftentimes what you'll see is the Democratic candidate, or vice versa, depending, ask the Republican voters to write in the name of a candidate, and if there are enough, and the threshold for Pittsburgh is 250, the Department of Elections will send that individual a letter in about another month and say, we've tallied the write-in votes for mayor of Pittsburgh, and hypothetically, if it's Mr. Marino, you have received a sufficient number of votes to qualify for the November election as a Republican candidate. You have until this day to come down and accept that. There's a nominal filing fee. Then he would be on the ballot again in November, this time representing the Republican Party. I don't think that changed. It doesn't change any dynamic. It will not do anything to take away from the fact that Mr. Gainey will be the next mayor. But procedurally, that's what could happen. I don't think it changes anything or the inevitable that we've been talking about.
And we don't know whether Ms. Marino will even do that. So he may.
If he gets a letter and he says, I don't want it, then he doesn't do anything, and there will be no name on the ballot.
All right, I want to bring this up because
Stacy, before we leave this though, I think we need to comment. To my knowledge, this is the first African-American mayor of the city of Pittsburgh.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Okay. And I really haven't seen much commentary on that, which surprises me in some respect, but kind of pleases me in other, because it seems to say everybody's accepting of this. That 20 years ago, it would have been a huge deal. But because Ed Gainey is out there and everybody knows who he is, and he got the support of African Americans, he got the support of white residents of Allegheny County and of multiple colors and creeds and so forth. It gives me a little hope we're moving forward a little bit in this country.
Yes.
But it should be noted that he is the first one to be nominated, and I'm pretty sure he's going to be the first one to be elected. And the eyes of Pennsylvania will certainly be on him from that point forward.
All right, I want to move over to something else that happened on Tuesday, and that is the passing of two constitutional amendments. I think Governor or someone brought it up just a few minutes ago. It all has to do with the emergency declarations, and it's almost like the legislature was able to put these amendments on there and now are snubbing their nose at the governor and saying, aha, we got the last laugh. And Governor, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Well, I think I talked about this the last time we were on. These two amendments were totally as a result of the lack of communication and the lack of cooperation coming out of the governor's office with the legislature to deal with such a unique emergency. And quite honestly, I think just not handling the emergency correctly. And frustration on the part of not just the legislature, but citizens all across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, businesses, schools, you name it, everybody was frustrated with it. I think I told you I didn't agree with it completely. I think the time frame of 21 days is too short, but I understand why it was done. Now, that said, if you went in and read the statement that was written, I think the Attorney General's office helped to write that one. It was a very, in my opinion, an argument on behalf of the governor not to pass this. Yeah. And it's still passed. I think that demonstrates exactly how frustrated the people of Pennsylvania are. My caution to the legislature, be careful what you wish for. You don't know who the legislature and you don't know who the governor is going to be 2, 4, 10 years from now, and how this might come back and bite you.
Anybody else want to comment on this one?
Yeah, I like the way, and I think I've said before that a camel is a horse designed by a committee. And the next time we have an emergency, we're going to have to convene a committee to decide what we need to do quickly. Good luck with that. So this is the kind of thing that was born out of resentment, was nearly unstoppable, politically, because of that resentment. But it's something that we're probably going to regret the next time we need somebody to weigh in with emergency powers. In a situation like we are currently in the midst of. I suspect there'll be calls then to change it back, because what if the emergency's in Harrisburg? What if it's another 3 Mile Island and you can't convene the legislature? What do you do then? I mean, so this hasn't been thought through. It reflects that resentment. It is what it is. It's the voters went for it, so it's a part of us now, but I think we're going to live to regret it.
I'm very happy they passed it. I think it was the right thing to do. I think the governor overreached dramatically last year with his powers in a crisis. I think the people of Pennsylvania recognized that and voted accordingly. There's also a danger on a second-term governor, because you're limited in Pennsylvania where you don't care. You're never going to face the music again. You're going to do what you want to do. But most importantly, guys, this isn't colonial America. This isn't the 18th century or the 19th century or the 20th century. It's the 21st century. It's not hard, even in a crisis, to keep elected officials at every level of state government involved with the crisis, informed, and allow them to help you form a strategy and opinion for the people they represent. That didn't happen even a little bit last year, and that's the reason I think the Pennsylvania voters reacted as they did on Tuesday.
It was more of a referendum on Governor Wolf's handling of the emergency than it was
correct
on anything else. If he would have done better at his communication, which he's never done good at, integrated with the appropriate organizations, PEMA, like Governor Corbett did when he faced emergency situations, if he would have communicated with the legislature more effectively, both chambers, I doubt that we would have seen that referendum. Less likely anyway. So his mismanagement of the crisis through his failure to communicate efficiently is what created the blowback on how he handled it, and why those two referendums were decisively voted on against him. And Governor, you're right. I think it's too short of a window. 21 days is not enough time to take that decision-making away from an executive in a crisis. And Professor, you're right. Be careful what you ask for. God forbid we find ourselves in a situation where it goes over to a committee and damage or lives are lost because of a knee-jerk reaction to an individual and not the entire situation moving down the field.
And I will make this observation. Because of that, those two amendments passing, I truly believe that in next year's gubernatorial race, the governor's handling of this will be campaigned against by the Republican, whoever the Republican candidate is. And right now we know the Democrat candidate looks like, because I haven't heard anybody else out there talking about it, Josh Shapiro. And I'm not running, but I got some specialists here. I'd be tying Josh to the governor and the governor's performance every chance I could to remind people, because there is anger out there and it's not going to go away.
Governor Wolf has pretty much said he hasn't endorsed him, but he's just about done everything else except that to this point. So if I'm a Republican strategist, I am going to tie the two of them together on this issue specifically next year, and there will probably be some play to the advantage of the Republican candidate.
Don't have a lot of time left here, and this is one that's going to be going on for a little bit, but your quick thoughts on the fact that after the census, we've lost one congressional seat. We have to redistrict for the congressional seats. We also have to redistrict for the state legislature. How will this progress? Are we going to see the cats and dogs again, or are we just going to see some harmony?
Well, no harmony. There will be no harmony on this. There never was, there never will be. It will end up in the Supreme Court and the maps will be drawn there. The interesting dynamic I see on all of this is the congressional redistricting more so than anything else. I suspect it will come from the West. They will merge two districts. It will be the Lamb district and the Kelly district, which is why you see Connor Lamb looking so aggressively at the possibility of a U.S. Senate run. It's either up or out for Connor Lamb, because if he merges with that district, he barely won against Mr. Purnell. He will not be successful if that's the way it plays out, in my opinion. Very difficult for him to win that seat if it merges.
I rarely want Jim to have the last word, but I'm going to allow him to have the last word today, because if there's only a few minutes left, we all collectively wanted to talk about you, Stacy, and the fact that after 50 years of broadcasting, you're going to be doing your final broadcast at least on a daily basis sometime next week. A remarkable career, the absolute dean of the delegation here in Pittsburgh, somebody that truly will be irreplaceable. Your legacy will live on, but I know that if you started 50 years ago, I'm not sure if you started at 10 or 12, but you look pretty good for a guy that's been in this business for a half a century. And we all know that you're going to be showing up in other places, and there's a lot left to do in your career, but your time at KDK and broadcasting officially comes to an end, and we wish you nothing but the very best.
Thank you, Keith.
Absolutely.
Thank
You
you.
know, that
Wait, Stacy,
When I
let
was
me
chairman,
say
I
this.
always enjoyed-
My life has been enriched because of your friendship, and the region has been enriched because of your professionalism, your journalistic values and ethics, and how you've reported the news to us all these years. For me, it's like Walter Cronkite leaving.
Amen.
And
Yes.
and it's going to be hard to take.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it.
As the only statewide candidate that's on this group here, Stacy, I echo everything they say, but I want to also say to a candidate, when you deal with the media, all you ask for is objectivity and fairness, and not a personal opinion. And we never heard a personal opinion from you. It was always objective. And, I've enjoyed it all that time, and certainly going to miss you. And we wish you all the best in whatever you're going to do next.
Thank you.
I've always appreciated the professionalism that you gave me when I was chairman, when you had me on Sunday edition. And afterwards, we would talk at your desk about politics. The thinking of me to come and do this program with you and these great commentators has meant a lot to me. And sitting on the 100th anniversary of KDKA, calling election results with you and my colleagues was an historic moment. And I will always cherish this opportunity. And I'm going to miss you and the professionalism that you bring to journalism in this region. It's been a pleasure to get to know you personally, to work with you, and to watch you deliver the news as you have done magnificently here. Thank you so much.
Your
Here, here.
wife's gain is our loss.
Thank you. You guys read the scripts very well that I presented to you. I appreciate that. And I also want to just say that for all of you, it's been my pleasure through the years to work with each one of you. And Governor, you're right. I did try to be as objective as I possibly could. And I think Joe and Keith and Jim will attest to that as well. That if nothing else, that's the one legacy I want to leave behind. That if nothing else, I was as fair as I possibly could be. And I really appreciate your comments on that as well. Before we all get, or at least I get teary-eyed, I'm going to end it right here. I believe that somewhere along the line, around the table will continue in some shape, manner, or form. And so, gentlemen, this is not a goodbye, but we'll see you when we tape the next program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great being
Thank you
with
very
you.
much.
Have a great
Stacy.
summer.
Thank you.